Hello, everybody. Welcome to this interview by Core Recruitment. Thank you very much for joining us today. As you might be aware, Core Recruitment is an international recruitment agency, and we specialize in mid to senior level appointments across non-exec and executive roles. Now, we've been doing this interview series to inject some positivity into the sectors that we operate within. And we've been speaking to some really amazing business leaders from those sectors to share their perspective, trends for 2026, and I guess some success stories to get you motivated and set up for the day. So if you want to sit back, relax for 20 minutes, we're going to be having a chat with Rob from Techspace. Hi, Rob. How are you?
Very good, thanks. How you doing?
I am very, very good indeed. Now, you are in one of the studio rooms at Techspace. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. So this is one of the kind of production rooms that we let our members use if they want to produce lovely content like the one that you're producing today.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for showcasing that as well. So I guess to get us kicked off, could you give us a little bit about Techspace and your current setup?
Yeah, sure. So Techspace is a flexible workspace business. So we acquire sites at the moment. We have eight in London, two in Berlin. We refurbish them and then we license them out on a short-term basis to primarily technology and creative businesses who are looking for space for between 12 and 24 months. That's the putted summary of what we do. As a business, we've been around for 12 years, although the vast majority of our growth has been in the couple of years immediately prior to the pandemic, and then the last 2 years after we all came out from the deep freeze.
Excellent. And is Berlin the kind of the natural expansion spot for kind of like a growing co-working company?
No, it's not. So we I suppose one of the many things you learn as you kind of like building a business. We focus on working with technology companies, and so as we once we'd launched our kind of platform in London and we're growing it quite comfortably there, we wanted to then go to the next largest kind of tech capital in Europe, which at the time in kind of 2017 was Berlin. There was the massive growth in particularly B2C technology businesses coming out of Berlin. And so we launched the business there, and I've got two really good, well-performing, profitable sites there. But yeah, the rationale was to follow our customers. It wasn't just let's look at where the real estate is. It was driven by a customer demand.
And tell us some of the challenges, because I mean, like, scaling internationally seems to be something which is on the list for a lot of UK companies at the moment. Tell us, like, some of the speed bumps you ran into and some of the challenges that you kind of faced. I can see there was a very sharp inhalation of breath that kind of came there. So there must have been some interesting situations, right?
Oh yeah, well it's also just hubris, right? Because you think, oh, we're doing really well, we're performing well in London, we understand our business, we understand our market, we understand our customers. We understand both the supply side from real estate and finding great sites and working with great landlords and partners. And surely we can just roll this out in another European city. What could be so difficult? I suppose the challenge is that there are idiosyncrasies in every European market you go to. And Germany's actually it's not a difficult place to work. We've always had a really good time working there. I haven't found it, difficult per se. I think the lesson from TechSpace's point of view is that we just did it far too early in our life as a company. We were still really subscale to be, launching an international operation. And what it does, it puts a little bit too much strain onto the business. It puts additional layers of central cost in when you don't really have the platform to support it. And so it's playing your business on hard mode unnecessarily. So international expansion is definitely something that, operational real estate businesses like ours should be looking at. But you need to be cautious about when to do it to not make it a little bit more difficult than it needs to be. It's all worked out well, but it was probably harder than it needed to be.
So is Paris on the cards, Madrid, Barcelona?
We are going to consolidate now and build more in London. I think probably is the focus for the next couple of years. We've looked at other European cities. I think if we were going to do another European city immediately, we'd focus on looking at other expansion opportunities in Germany. Germany, obviously, it's a massive country, federalized. So there's a couple of other very strong tech markets within Germany, particularly Munich. So we've looked extensively at Munich. But for now, I'd say our focus is on expansion in London, which is, it's the co-working flex office capital of the world, and there's plenty of opportunity here for us.
Excellent. Is it the capital of the world when it comes to flex working? Is that is
I'd
that is
say,
that an official accolade?
well, that's certainly the one I would give it.
Excellent. Love that. Rob from TechSpace says that. Okay, cool. I'm game for that. That's amazing. So, in terms of the trends that you're seeing at the epicenter of the co-working world, what would you say that you guys are seeing in your customer base at the moment?
Well, it's really interesting. This obviously the last kind of 5 years has been, the flush out from the pandemic or getting out of the back end of the pandemic and looking at the way that people work and people use office space. What's been really interesting looking at our customer base, which is primarily focused on technology and creative businesses, is their ways of working haven't actually changed that much from prior to the pandemic to now. They were always hybrid, flexible workers. They always had quite modern ways of working, always using technology at the core of what they do to facilitate remote working. So, in terms of the usage of the office, we've not seen a huge change in our customer behavior. What we have seen, however, is the demand has significantly returned for office space, particularly centrally located, high quality spaces. So, if you are operating a top end of the market, flexible workspace or office space in London, I would expect you're seeing what we're seeing, which is demand has come back fairly significantly. But in terms of our customer base, the way of working hasn't actually changed massively.
Excellent. And in terms of trends for services
Mm,
within kind of like co-working, because we've seen, there's the stereotypical beer taps and all of this kind of stuff that kind of like,
yeah,
people are putting in to start off with. Now you've got kind of like, studio space. There's others we've been into that have got slides and funnels and all sorts of kind of like things going on. When customers are kind of coming around and they're comparing you with others, what kind of
yeah.
services are they looking for or demanding?
It's really, I'd say it was almost going back to basics. A lot of the maybe slightly silly things are actually they're not what people want from their office space these days. What we tend to see more of is people because there's more video calls like this. Um, People want dedicated meeting space. They want phone booths. They want good acoustic treatment in rooms so you can have a good experience when you're working and talking to somebody who isn't in the same room as you. They want a high quality space. I think the phrase I really like is that we don't really worry too much about the competition, save for the competition of working from home. You say your office space really has to earn somebody's commute time or, the comparable, which is them, quite a nice and comfortable setup at home. And then you've got to think about why people are coming together, and hopefully they're not coming into an office just to jump on video calls all day long, but hopefully they're doing it because they want to collaborate. And so you need to create breakout spaces, meeting rooms, and other areas where people feel like they can, have a good experience when they're collaborating with their colleagues. So that's that. It's people care much more about that than they do about beer taps or whatever else it might be.
Excellent, love that. Now you studied law and chemistry at university, didn't
Yeah,
you? Yeah.
yeah.
Is that is that a natural kind of like swing into the world of co-working?
Doesn't seem it, does it? No. So I was always the approach I took was non-linear, but I think that what I've always tried to do is do the things that I'm interested in that I think I can deliver impact on or make a difference in, and that I can do well at. I love doing the chemistry degree because it gave me that angle on critical problem solving, scientific methods, and I happen to be not too bad at it as well. So that was what I originally pursued. And then I pursued law because I felt like I didn't have that skill set. If you do a kind of science degree, you don't develop the same skill set you would doing a kind of arts degree. So I really wanted to round out my skills and also kind of go into the business world. And so qualifying as a lawyer and then working in corporate M&A for a number of years, that did that for me and helped me to kind of round out those skills. So not not the most obvious or linear path, but it's been pretty useful. But that stage was all about acquiring skills for me. And then since then, all I wanted to do is build businesses, and so I'm just using those skill sets to help me solve problems in a business context.
Did you map out your career in that way in terms of saying this is my business acquiring kind of like this is this is this? So what comes after business building?
Well, I'd love it if it was strategic as that. I'd love if I'd sat down as a 20-year-old and said, "Oh, no, this is what I'm going to do. It's all going to be great and linear." It wasn't like that at all. I was conscious that I wanted to learn. I didn't know anything, so I wanted to be able to learn things so I could add value. And then what I realized going into working in a larger corporate, a very large international law firm, is that I would like to try something at a smaller scale. I launched my own business, doing digital healthcare. After that role in law, and then from then kind of found myself working with the guys who set up Techspace when it was a very small business, turning over about £1 million. And at that time, what I found is that it was kind of this perfect combination of a relatively small business that had a ambitious growth trajectory. It was in a sector that was growing rapidly. It was working adjacent to technology companies, which is what I'd been doing before, is working with technology businesses. And it was, I didn't realize it, but working in operational real estate, it's effectively it's a hospitality business. And having a product where you can touch and feel it and you're looking after your customers and you're delivering a hospitality experience just rounded out everything that I liked about working in business. So it just seemed like too much of a good opportunity to turn down. So yeah, it wasn't strategic, but it's worked out okay so
Love
far.
that. Now, not every day is a sunny day in business, kind of like obviously. Can you tell us about one of your biggest kind of challenges and how you've overcome it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think like everybody in our the sectors that we work with, Christian, the pandemic was a pretty dire time. There was a risk that our revenue would go to zero, and we were trying to sell office space in a pandemic, and that was extremely challenging. We made some mistakes during that period, like everybody, I'm sure. I think what we learned from that experience is to be very, very open and honest with your customers and your partners and your suppliers and your shareholders, and you can kind of pretty much overcome any challenge. I think the other kind of theme that certainly I've experienced earlier in my career that I think was a mistake is confusing busyness with delivering impact. I think just making sure that you're always focusing on like the highest leverage tasks has been something that I think progressively gotten better at, and that's a mistake. But it's a mistake you kind of make over and over again because if you care, you want to get involved, you want to get into the weeds on things, and then you realize actually you're not delivering the leverage that you should be delivering. That's probably a mistake I've made.
Love that. And in terms of the people you've worked with previously or not worked with, kind of like, in terms of like who's inspired you when you are having a bad moment, how like I often kind of think, oh, what would so and so do in this situation? You know what I mean? Who would you say has inspired you?
Um, I guess like through my career. So first of all, the first kind of big proper job I had was in this corporate law firm, and I worked with a partner, a guy called Ben Higson, who is he was just incredibly impressive, unflappable, but very, very, very open about when he didn't know the answer to something, and not at all embarrassed. I think just maybe it's the way that my education works, or our education systems work, that you're encouraged to kind of know the answer to everything, and that's incredibly unhelpful when you get into a business context because you can put yourself into a position where you're rapidly out of your depth. And he taught me that just putting your hand up and saying either you've made a mistake or that you don't know the answer to something was something that you should get very comfortable doing. So that was always really inspiring. Uh, my current boss, Jonathan, who so his background he used to run the international uh, business for Clear Channel, the outdoor advertising business. So it's come from a much bigger business and now works in a modest sized business, Techspace. And I he's incredibly calm under pressure, and incredibly fair in the way that he operates. I'm When I feel myself getting angry and frustrated, I sometimes try and channel his his calmness and his fairness. So yeah, that's certainly been certainly been a couple of really positive influences in my life. I feel like there's so many great leaders in operational real estate that you can draw from. I was saying just before we started this call, I was in Disney World a week or so ago, and Matt, I would love to meet the managers, senior manager who operate those parks, because the experience they deliver was just, well, certainly my experience was absolutely incredible. So that was inspiring to see. So yeah, there's so many people you can take inspiration from.
All about back of house, front of house, isn't it, Rob? All about back of house, front of house. So in terms of like innovation, technology, operational, like, what's affecting your business at the moment, especially from a tech perspective and what you guys are adapting?
Yeah, so there's a few bits. So one thing we did quite early on is we rolled out some basic AI tooling to our teams, and said, look, just don't worry about what you're doing with this tooling. We made it private and secure so that our data stays as our data, and we don't have to worry about customer data. We put some basic rules in place. but I wanted our, particularly our operational teams, to get very comfortable using AI tooling to help them be more efficient on a day-to-day basis with their tasks. So whether that's writing an email, or dealing with a particularly difficult interaction, or a piece of feedback you need to give to a team member. So we wanted them to just use that tooling as part of their BAU work. So we rolled that out pretty early on, but now we're putting in more structure around it because we think people are now comfortable engaging with LLMs on on a day-to-day basis. Almost in every task they do, they ask the AI first, and then crowdsource it with your peers. So that's one thing we've done. The other thing we're doing is a big bit of project. If I think about thematics of it, it's all to do with reducing the amount of busy work that we do as a business, and low impact work, so that we can spend our time, effort, energy, resources on delivering a more personalized and hospitable experience for our members, our customers. So one of the things we're doing is we're doing a big project around how we all of the data that we take in as a business, whether that's from our CRM, our contracting platform, our support ticketing system, pulling that all together so that we can then layer on tooling to help us draw insights out from it, whether that's about a good or bad experience for a customer, and then operational learnings from that, or whether that we think there might be some revenue risk over here because we're seeing particular behaviors. So that's a big project we're doing, which will give us great insight, but also help us be more operationally efficient. So those are two big projects that kind of, I suppose, come to mind first of all.
Excellent. That's really good. And in terms of like your own career, thinking back to kind of like, when you started, and this is more of the part of kind of like giving some advice to other people who might be watching this, thinking that they want to get an aspiring career within the world of co-working. Like, is there any advice that you would go back and give to your kind of like younger self?
Yeah. So co-working is, as a sector, it's a fantastic sector for anybody who is looking to build a career in hospitality, um, uh, and wants to work on a really long-term basis with customers. So it's this funny one where there are so many fantastic people who work in hospitality, and but they're used to dealing with quite transient, high turnover customer bases. We might have an interaction with a customer once or twice. It's quite rare to get regulars in a lot of hospitality roles. So this is a role where you get to build really, really long-term relationships with members. Um, so that's something that I think anybody who's interested in what it means to deliver a great experience or great hospitality, they should look at. It's also slightly less antisocial hours than a lot of hospitality roles, which is quite nice. So that's one thing. In terms of advice, I'd give to myself, or give to anybody else. I would say, I suppose it goes back to my point earlier on about the mistake that I've been prone to making, is don't mistake the kind of work you're doing, your busy work, as impactful work. So make sure you're being deliberate and thoughtful about the work you do on a day-to-day basis, because it's the 1% incremental improvement every day that you make through doing the right work that actually helps you build the career to where you want to get to. Don't expect it to be linear, but be prepared to take risks, but always try to do that impactful work. Of course, you're going to have to do some of the boring admin work. We all have to do that. But make sure that as part of your work every day and every week, you're doing something that's impactful.
Excellent. And Rob, last thing you mentioned about your expansion within London. You've got 8 sites in London already, is that
Yep.
right? Yep. So where are the without giving too much away, kind of like east, west, north, south, residential, non-resident, like what parts are you thinking that's going to be further growth?
Central London. So, but it'll be, so currently our sites are focused on City, Shoreditch, Farringdon, Clerkenwell areas. But this business needs to be spread out throughout central London. So actively looking in Soho, Fitzrovia, further west than that. I'd love to have locations near Waterloo, near London Bridge. Yeah, anywhere centrally is where we're looking.
Excellent. You heard it here first, landlords. If you've got any space that you want to give Rob at Techspace, he's right there for you.
We'd
Rob,
love to come and look.
Rob, really enjoyed the chat. Thank you so much. And thank you very much for being so candid about kind of like all of your experience that you've had.
Thanks very much.